What's going on? Good morning, everybody. Well, morning on the West Coast. It's 8 a.m. out here in California. Some of you guys have a little bit of a head start on me. But good morning. We are here with Mike of Junk Wax Hero, Adam of Splendid Sports, and the one and only Dr. Beckett. How you guys doing?
Great.
All right. So we have a lot that we can go into today. But the topic that I wanted to get into was kind of, are we in a new sports card bubble? And there are a few reasons that comes to mind. I listened to Chris Hoge's Hogecast, and he's been calling it a bull market for a while. I think
it's his word.
Yeah, and it's definitely frothy for sure. And so I think I wanted to take a look at the first time I started kind of thinking about that was something that Adam said. And I agree with Adam on this comment, and I want to get his reaction when we come back, and then I want to go around the horn and see what you guys think.
Starting to realize that it's almost like 2021 again. And it's a little different. You know, it's not the exact same cards that are going crazy. Some, iconic cards are doing the same thing they did. Now, history does repeat itself. Nobody knows if it's going to be just like the last time, and next month or in 2 months, we're going to go straight down again on those cards. But I made a decision myself. I'm not going to be buying any big cards, at least for the rest of the year, and maybe longer than that. Now, I say the term big because, or you could say expensive, because, everyone has a different budget in the hobby. So an expensive card for someone out there might be $100,000. For someone else, it might be $10,000. Someone else, it could be $100. Whatever that is, it is for the person. But for me, I've decided I might not buy any cards, to be honest with you. I have a lot of the cards that I've always wanted. I have many things to do in my collection other than buying new cards. I have to organize. I have to reholder some cards. I have to free some cards from some slabs that I want to put in my own slabs. I mean, there is, for any amount of time I have on this hobby, I have plenty of other things I can spend it on other than researching, buying cards, trying to eBay. I've deleted all my eBay save searches. This is not that I don't believe in the sports card market long-term or anything like that. But to me, it certainly feels like we're back in early 2021 right now. And I don't want anything to do with buying cards right now at these level of prices.
All right. So Adam, I know your next follow-up video, you kind of were like, I don't want to come across as negative. I don't think you sounded negative there. I just thought you were telling your truth. So where do you stand by those comments? I don't think you need to walk them back at all. I don't. But follow up on what you had to say there.
Yeah, and I can't stand watching myself talk. Yeah, that was rough. But that was more of a personal choice based on where I'm at with my collection. And the prices that we're seeing on some cards was like the icing on the cake. So, I'm definitely not a doomsdayer on the sports card market. Like I think some people in the comments called me, which is okay. I love cards, love the hobby. But a lot of that video kind of got prompted. I saw where the 89 Griffey Upper Deck PSA 10 was selling over $4,000. And I was kind of shocked at that. So that kind of prompted that video. And I'm still not buying big cards. But again, that's just where I'm at personally. But, I like seeing other people buy cards.
Now, Mike, have you thought about slowing down your buying or big card buying? And I'm saving Dr. Beckett for last for a reason. Have you adjusted what you're doing at all recently, Mike?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that the biggest part of this bubble is, as commenters have said, many other people have said, is more iconic, bigger cards. You're not seeing the same thing that happened in 2020, early 2021, which is everything skyrocketing in value. You're mostly seeing the rarer items go up at an alarming rate. And I think that that's where I've kind of slowed down. I bought some stuff at the National, and I've slowed down the big stuff since the National, and probably will continue to unless I find some amazing deal.
Now, out of anyone in the history of the hobby, I don't know if anybody has studied and tracked the prices as closely as you, Dr. Beckett. So I'm very curious, what do you think about the current market? But also, if you could shed some light in historically when you've seen times where there were spikes or there were times that there were dips, because there have been dips, at least in certain areas of the market. What are some things historically that, as you watched prices and tracked prices, that you noticed were kind of trigger points or when things happen? What were the correlations for a statistics guy?
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, basically, what happened in 1980? That was a bubble. What happened in 87? That was a bubble. What happened in the mid 90s? That was a bubble. So there's been other bubbles, but I like to think of it as bubbles plural, not like the hobby is one big giant spotlight, but it's like a bunch of LED lights that are clustered together. And there's certain things that you could put out or that go are brighter or dimmer, but the whole hobby is rarely hot at the same time, and people move around from something that they think is a little too hot, a little too perhaps overvalued, a little too many people chasing it, supply and demand. But we're in a situation where people need to not buy cards that they think are overpriced. You know, when I was more of a serious dealer collector, I bought everything that I saw that was a good deal, you know, and now people don't look for a good deal. They look for their card, and their card that's on their list is the same card that's on a lot of people's list. And it gets bid up to where, so every one of those 80, 87, there was a run up. If something doubles overnight, you know, the faster something goes up, the more easily it can come down. If it's going up slightly, you know, a little bit each month, that doesn't happen anymore. It something gets a new world record price, maybe it's doubled. Those are the cards that can easily go down in an extreme fashion, the things that go up. So I think hopefully instead of thinking of one big bubble, we're thinking of certain things get too hot and I need to back off from them and look for something that's not just like the arrows of the old magazine. Arrows didn't mean it was going up, it meant it went up. So things that had already gone up, when people are chasing them, they chase it until it's too high. And that particular bubble can either pop or it can go back to, and a lot of times it goes back to more than it was at the beginning, but not to the full price. So
I think
I
that's
would say, you know, that don't your buying habits, you're reflecting on your buying habits, and you're taking a break from some of the things you're chasing that have gotten pricey. And if enough people do that, the price goes down, and then you can jump back in. There's always been an ebb and flow. But there would never be a crash if things went up 5% a month or 5% a year. But if things go up double one month, it's it can go quite a bit down, and still people that bought it more than a month ago, who then brought it out to sell it, could still make money.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good point that, you know, the cryptocurrency thing where things triple in a week and then they go down 50% the next week and then they quadruple the next week. There is so much truth to that. Now, a couple of people have been asking in the comments. I'll go to you, Adam, because one of them was kind of directed toward you. Are you referring to vintage cards, modern cards, all cards when you talk about the fact that you think that maybe things have gotten a little bit carried away? Because I think, like Dr. Beckett just said, there might be certain bubbles in the market, but does it mean that the whole market is in a bubble? Maybe, maybe not. And then John 3D and Dylan just said, well, I mean, isn't there a bigger collector base than there was a few years ago? So could that have something to do with it?
Yeah, I think I was talking more about certain cards, but I would say if it had to choose between vintage and modern, I guess I was looking more modern. Although, you know, I saw in Card Ladder the pre-war index that they have there is at an all-time high for pre-war, even higher than, like, you know, 2021 or any of that stuff. The vintage index is not at an all-time high, but it's up there pretty good. But, you know, with that's so true what Dr. Beckett said now about how things don't go up slowly. That's what surprised me the most about that Griffey card. I hadn't looked at it in a while, and I remember where it was like a $2,000 card in a PSA 10 like a few months back, and then 3 months later it's selling consistently at 4,000, and that's what really, to me, was hard to wrap my head around. How does a card with 4,400 copies in a PSA 10 double in price? So, but yeah, I guess those are the days we're in now, where things don't go up steadily, so to speak. They just double almost in a month or two, and then I don't know really why. Is it, I guess, going to that next question, there probably is a lot more collectors. There's a new batch of people coming in, and that Griffey card was the one they remember as a kid, and it's now selling at that price because there's a lot of new people that wanted it. For us that have, you know, been looking at that card for a long time and see where the price is, I don't think we would buy it at 4,000 when we just could have gotten it 3 months ago at 2,000 or 2,500. But if someone's coming in cold and saying, what's the price of an 89 Griffey PSA 10? 4,000. Okay, let's do it. You know, I think that might be some of that.
Adam, one quick clarification. A lot of the new people coming in are not classic collectors. They're more along the lines of investors. They're late to the party. They're jumping in. They don't have the education, and they're saying, "Hey, this is what's hot. Things are going up. I'm gonna buy that." But my point is that I don't want those people to leave. I think those people need to see the nuance of the hobby, and instead of a bright, huge bull market, everything's going up, think of it as a dimmer switch. You know, when things get too bright, you need to turn it down a little bit, and the turning down happens naturally in the laws of supply and demand and economics. When more come out and more people, uh, then the price goes down because people say, "Wow, that's too expensive." That's a natural ebb and flow, and that's like a safety valve or a relief valve that brings it back to the equilibrium of, this really ought to be a hobby for collectors, by collectors, and I don't want it to get hijacked by huge money people that bid up the great cards of the hobby.
Mike, what's your reaction to this? I mean, do you think that because there are areas that aren't going up, there are areas right now that are going down within the hobby, right? I mean, I just did a video the other day, and you could buy a PSA 5 Al 57 alkaline for cheap. You know, it's like, but the big cards, and that's what Dr. Beckett was talking about a second ago. Some of these big cards have, you know, that's where the light is shining the brightest at the moment. What's your thought on that, Mike?
So alkaline, I don't think has a big future. In terms of collecting, I don't think people are saying, new people in the hobby who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s are coming in and saying, I need an alkaline card. That's just not happening. They are saying, I need Ken Griffey Jr., I need Mickey Mantle, I need the big time athletes whose stories carry across generations. And everybody may not remember them, but they know a lot about them. And even the Ken Griffey Jr. 89 Upper Deck autographed card has doubled in value in the last 6 to 12 months or so, which is crazy. Like Adam said, there are 4,400 in the 10. There are thousands of them that are autographed too, many thousands of them. And just an autograph in a PSA 8 with a 10 autograph has doubled in under a year.
And it reminds me sort of like the what, to allude to an example of what you were saying about new people to the hobby going to Ken Griffey Jr., you know, going to guys like Shohei, going to a Mickey Mantle, even if you're into vintage, because, you know, if you look at sports teams, you know, if somebody says, I want to start following baseball, they tend to go after the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Dodgers, the big market teams like that. And the big market teams in cards are those premier names. And the premier names it does seem like those are the ones that are going up crazy. But it's also interesting to me that they're going up while other stuff is going down. Like some stuff is going down right now.
So you highlight Dan's comment there about Cracker Jack cards. It's not only iconic players and iconic cards, it's iconic sets. Cracker Jack cards, 1952 tops, things like that are skyrocketing in value too.
Because they're
Well,
they're being increasingly talked about.
right.
And I'm not going to blame content creators, but I mean, if something's being talked about, and you come into the hobby, say, hey, that must be where the action is. Well, it is where the action is. It is where the action was, but nobody's talking about where the action will be.
Yeah, I mean, so how much of this is to blame on content creation? Because one of the things I think about is what percentage of people who are actually in the hobby even pay attention to at least YouTube. Now, I know Instagram has a whole content creator base, and all the different platforms do. Is that as big a part of it, or are we overestimating how much of the blame goes there? I don't know. Adam, do you think that the content creation, that Instagram and the YouTube is blowing up things like Cracker Jack cards and Shohei cards, and how much is to
Definitely.
blame there?
I think actually I've heard people say that, only a small, very minute percentage of the hobby watches any YouTube or social media or consumes anything like that. I think that's understated. I think there's a lot of people, I don't know what the percentage is, but I think there's a huge percentage of people now that are being influenced. That's not a bad term. That's just their buying decisions are being affected by podcasts and YouTube channels. I mean, I want to give an example. Cajun Cardboard. He created, and that he's a very sharp, well-spoken guy and makes videos, I think, almost every day. And he's essentially dedicated his whole channel to Michael Jordan cards. I mean, for the most part. And that's great. I think that's awesome. I think that's the type of content that we need more of in the hobby, and a commitment to that. It's a lot of work to do that. But someone like that, just one example, I think that makes a huge difference. I mean, I'm not saying he's 100% the reason, but look at what Michael Jordan cards are doing on Fanatics Collect. Every time I go on Instagram, I see Card Ladder reporting a new Michael Jordan card. Most of them I didn't even know existed, inserts that I never even heard of, that are hitting all-time highs day after day after day. Not the 86 Fleer all the time. It's like, Power in the Key and all these cards I never even knew existed. I think that's one example that it makes a huge difference. There's more people. I mean, just guys, your channels combined. I mean, think about how many people you reach with that, and think about the whole community on YouTube. I mean, even a channel that gets 100 views, right, on a video, that's 100 views times how many channels are out there that are reaching all these different people. I think it's making a huge difference.
Guys, I'm not blaming content creators. I'm giving them credit when they're bringing honest passion to, as long as it's honest and it's passionate, that can go viral. What I don't like is people if they're being too self-serving. But when it's honest passion, like Cajun Cardboard, I mean, I think he's not reading a script. He's speaking from the heart, and he's got analytical chops to back it up. I like that kind of stuff, but people still need to do their own due diligence.
Now, let me ask you, Dr. Beckett, because back in the day, you were the content creator. You had the articles, you had the what's hot, what's cold at the front end of the Beckett. How difficult of a responsibility was that when you were one of the primary sources of that? And I know what you did is you extrapolated data and you used where are the up arrows, and that's what's creating the hot, and what's got the down arrows is probably the not. And I get that, but there is a responsibility with that, right?
Of course, but like I say, honest passion. that's coming from, helping, promote the whole hobby, and telling it like it is. You want to emphasize the positive, but, we also had a cold list.
Yeah.
The hot list and the cold list, those were editorial. The price guide was analytical, was data driven. There was much more editorial selection and discussion rather than analysis of the hot list.
Now, Mike, let me turn something to you. So when I'm talking about a card or a player that I'm collecting, I just showed my autogram run. Like, legitimately, it doesn't even cross my mind for a single second that that might impact what other people might buy. Like, I like autogram because I think he's undervalued. I think football cards are undervalued. The guy has championships and MVPs and all this stuff. He was one of the original quarterback goats, and his cards are affordable, and I like the looks of them. I think they're beautiful cards, and so I lay out my autogram run, 50 to 55, and I go, these are awesome. And then you do occasionally have people go, this guy's pumping football cards, and I'm like, I just love football cards. Do you ever have to think about that, Mike, when you're making content? Do you think, wow, I have to be careful that I don't pump something accidentally, or is that just not something that goes through your mind? Because it doesn't go through mine.
It has never gone through my mind, and I can't imagine that it's going to. If people are interested in the cards that I'm interested in, that's great. But I'll give you an example. Adam did a video where he showed off some Pedro Martinez 1990s refractors. And I was like, oh man, those are amazing. I need those. And I went to eBay to look. And all it would take is one other person who saw Adam's video at the same exact time to go. And if the two of us are bidding up rare Pedro Martinez 1990s refractors, then that market can, in the very short term, go up. You've created new comps. You've got 2 or 3 cards. That it can happen. It's a weird confluence of events when somebody is showing really cool rare cards, and you can see something, some sort of impact from that.
Well, and I think you can also see some impact because on these ultra rare cards with low populations, it only takes a couple of people to want to get in the market to really affect the price. And I'm wondering if that's part of the reason why. I mean, Orlando said it in the chat earlier, like pre-war stuff and rare, stuff is absolutely on fire. And it does feel like a lot of people are moving toward the rare stuff over the iconic stuff. But then the Ken Griffey Jr. is like the least rare card of all time, and it's doubled in price in the last 6 months. I mean, Adam, do you think that the rareness factor is a part of the price? Because I don't think the Ken Griffey Jr. plays into that, but it feels to me like rare stuff is what's going nuts. So how do we use the Ken Griffey Jr. example in line with that, or am I out of touch and that's not the case?
Yeah, that's why I couldn't wrap my head around that card. That was a specific example because, to your point, a lot of the stuff, even the Michael Jordan cards I was talking about, a lot of those are numbered to 100 or 50. So there's not that many of them out there. And to Mike's point, it doesn't take a lot for a card like that to set an all-time high in an auction, as long, especially when you have. I mean, when I say marketing, I've been doing marketing for 20 years. I believe in marketing when it's done right, and honestly, it works. And the Fanatics marketing, I think, has already started to work, even though they don't even have the football and the basketball licenses, I guess, officially yet, or they haven't put out cards yet. I think the marketing that you're seeing, I mean, Tom Brady has card shops now. That's pretty big. I heard the other day on a podcast, Stacking Slabs, with Drake, who's a huge Peyton Manning collector. He now is worrying about Peyton Manning outbidding him on Peyton Manning cards because Peyton Manning is buying his best cards apparently, and he wants, like, his son collects, so they want to get his best cards. I mean, think about that. You're going against the guy you're trying to get a card of in an auction in some of these. It's kind of crazy. So I think there's definitely more people in it, and the marketing is working.
Now, the thing that I'm protective of is I'm protective of the new collector. The new collector who's coming in is the one who's very idealistic and very impressionable. And when some people are being indiscriminate with what they're pumping and they don't have good intentions, how do we protect, Dr. Beckett, how do we protect the people who are new to the hobby from these new platforms where it's very easy for anybody to pump something? And what can we do to say, well, Greg, he's passionate about vintage football, but this other person, he's not. He's just pumping something. How does the new collector know that? How do we protect those people?
Well, it's just like you protect your child. It's okay. It's okay for a child to get burned, not okay for the child to get killed. So, in the hobby, the example is, you're going to learn from your mistakes. You just don't want the mistakes to be fatal, that I'm
Mhm.
out of here. If you slightly overpay for something, you follow the herd, that's not a criminal offense. That's a learning experience. And so I just think we've got to stay the course with honest passion of helping people understand and learn from their mistakes. It is not a no-brainer to think that, hey, everything's going up. I can buy anything at any price because next month will be higher. That's you're going to get burned. You may not get burned on everything, but you'll have some good examples of, wow, I followed the herd all the way off the cliff on that one.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I guess maybe some of the education that we should consider, and I mean, Mike, I don't know if you've made videos on this, but I've talked about it a little bit. But if you're kind of new to the hobby and you're thinking about going into an area that you weren't before, like maybe you are a modern collector and you're thinking about getting into vintage or vice versa, maybe you don't do a swan dive into the deep end. Maybe you just kind of wade in slowly in the shallow end so that you can learn, so that those burns aren't severe. Like Dr. Beckett just said, that if you don't want it to be, you know, a near death experience, you want it to be minor. And I think that that's one of the concerns with some of the pumping that happens is it's like, this is a sure thing. This is what you've got to do. And if you're new, I don't know. I mean, is that how
That's
do
not
we encourage people to do that, Mike? How do we encourage people to just, wade in instead of do a cannonball in the deep end?
Dr. Beckett, go ahead. You had something to
no.
say.
They want to do a cannonball. Why are you telling them not to do that? You don't want them to do this belly flop smack where they have where they're in a coma. They land flat. But if they do a cannonball and make a big splash, uh, it's hard to tell them to not do what's human nature. That's all I'm saying. But they're not going to die from a cannonball. They're going to think, well, I don't want to do that again, or hey, I want to jump back up and do it again. And if they run out of money, or they have some friends say, hey, here's a way to do a swan dive, or here's a way to do a backflip. People, they just have different personalities, and so we can't. I'm the old guy here. You can't say, hey, this is the way to collect.
Yeah,
You
that's
have to
true.
have a voice of reason. No, you need a voice of passion that's bridled with some common sense and some learning as you go. That's
That's a good point. But Mike, what about Dan's comment? He's saying that it sends them straight to these big channels instead of the kind of, I don't know, uh, average thinking type guy. Is that, I mean, what's your response to that, Mike?
And yet people still discover us somehow. We don't have great production value. We don't have amazing thumbnails. The thumbnails are really the thing that attract people to videos, and all the SEO things that the bigger channels do. But people are still finding our channels, and we're getting thousands of views per video because the YouTube algorithm is still going to feed people who are interested in our things, our videos, and that's important and it's helpful. I think that I I enjoy some of Jeff's videos. I'm sorry, I do. I do think that some of them are very bad, but I also enjoy some of them, and it's okay that there is a massive, massive channel that a lot of people are getting fed to. I think that we are kind of the next step for a lot of people once they're ready for more education.
Yeah, I hear that, and I agree with that, and but YouTube's algorithm isn't designed to protect new collectors. Like to Mike's
Right.
or to Dan's point, YouTube is designed to get people to go on YouTube and stay on YouTube. They're not designed to go, oh, well, these people might be new, so we should send them to this guy over here. And I'm not suggesting you're saying that, Mike, but that's part of the conundrum that I think we have when we're talking about something like, you know, new people in the hobby and their influence. And that does concern me. It absolutely concerns me. And you're right. The production value that I have is I literally am the lowest production. People say, how much money did you invest? I go, zero. $0 was
Greg,
invested.
Greg, if your production value is bad, then I'm in real trouble because yours is way better than mine. So I don't know. I think you guys do a great job with that.
I mean, we might edit some stuff a little
Yeah.
bit, but I mean, these guys have teams of professionals
That's
that are, professionally educated. We can't compete with that.
right.
Oh, no, you could if you chose to go. Jeff Wilson is not an accidental success.
That's
But
true.
his success metric, the numbers he looks at for what is a success, is different than what probably anybody here looks at. He looks at it he's very entrepreneurial, and he's invested a lot into it. And I believe he has honest passion, but he's got so many irons in the fire now, and so many, they're not conflicts of interest as much as he's moving in a lot of directions.
I I completely agree, and I want to respond to this comment right here. But I do want to acknowledge we just crossed the 100 people in the chat threshold, so very, very much appreciate that to everybody who came out and joined us this morning, especially my West Coast people like you, Joe.
Right.
I why are we throwing marshmallows? I don't think Dr. Beckett is throwing marshmallows. I think he's being a little bit more straight. It's not the way that I am is, and I just dropped the video this morning, and I basically am saying instead of talking about all the things that I don't like about something, we have a lot in common. I have a lot in common with every content creator. And so I don't really feel the need to shoot arrows at a guy who has a slight difference in me. Now I realize that some content creators are have good intentions and some don't. And to a certain amount, I should help protect others from that. But at the same time, that's like Dr. Beckett just said, that is a small burn, I think. And so people do have to learn. And I'm not going to badmouth somebody else and what they're doing to make myself seem like I'm better than what they're doing. I'm just going to be me. And if people choose to be with them, that's fine. If people don't, that's fine. But I'm just not in. That's just not me. I'm just not going to go rip on people that I don't agree with. But I do appreciate what you're saying. I do appreciate that I'm not attacking a specific person, and that's for somebody else. And there are channels that do that, and that's their spot in the hobby. For me, um, I mean, Mike, how would you answer that? Are we throwing marshmallows at certain people, or are we just being uh, inclusive people?
I don't think the intent was for us to come out and say Jeff Wilson is bad for the hobby. That's just not something that we are here to do. I think his goal is to completely maximize revenue for himself and his business. And our goal is to have fun because this is a side hobby for most of us is doing YouTube. And if we can make a little money, which I think we do, at the same time, that's great. But I'm not trying to maximize my YouTube revenue. I don't have the time for that.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. My goal is not to get views. It's just not. It's to share my love of certain things that I love. How about this? Now, this is one of the topics that I had kind of put on the side, and I do think it's on a lot of people's mind. There was this video that came out with a former PSA employee. Now, he worked uh, he didn't work in the grading room. The guy worked in the uh, information gathering, like identifying what the cards are. Yeah. Does anybody have an opinion on that video? I mean, it's got 44,000 views, so I think it's worthy of at least reacting to. It was Professor Sports Cards is the name of the channel. The guy's been doing lots of content, lots of lives lately. And does anybody have an opinion on that? I mean, Adam, did you watch that video?
I did. Yeah, I watched that video. Yep. And I guess the one thing that I was thinking about after that one, when the guy who worked at PSA was saying that employees send in their cards, as you would imagine, right? Although I don't know, would it be more ethical if a PSA employee wasn't allowed to submit to PSA? But then I don't know what the solution would be there. But when an employee sends in cards to PSA, they get marked and they know they're from an employee. And then I guess people can grab certain cards. Like you have a choice. You can just go over. I'm like picturing a table where you get all these options and someone can go over and say, oh, I feel like grading these today, and you kind of choose. So that was interesting to me. I never heard that before. But yeah, I don't know. I'd love to hear, Dr. Beckett, your thoughts on conflict of interest with people that work at PSA being able to grade with PSA. Does that matter, or what do you think on that?
What we tried to establish at BGS was kind of like a double-blind system where you didn't know whose cards you were grading. You weren't picking out the cards; they were assigned, and you didn't know whose cards they were, and the person submitting didn't know who the grader was. So it was double-blind. And although I'm pretty sure I know who was grading the cards that I submitted a number of years ago, because Andy Broom was doing most of the vintage in those days. And I think Andy was getting my cards, but he was getting a lot of the vintage cards. But within reason, I think there's an attempt, and most companies, and I'm certainly not going to throw PSA under the bus. I think they're doing a lot of things right. And, but you want to not just have avoid conflict. You want to avoid the appearance of conflict of interest, and anything that suggests that I can grade my buddy's cards is not a good look. And that certainly was I think we really avoided that at BGS, and I would think PSA would avoid that as well. And even then, it's grade the card, not grade the submitter. I always had a pet peeve that if certain bulk submitters were perceived as getting more preferred grades, that's damaging to the brand. The card needs to be judged on its own merits, and that's regardless of who submitted it and who graded it. And that's why we frequently have a second grader to come in and make sure there was congruence.
Can I ask you a question, Dr. Beckett? I've always been curious from the grading perspective about this topic. When new technologies are introduced to the grading process, so maybe, PSA is using some sort of software to determine the exact centering standards or what the centering of a card is, or they're using new technologies I saw SGC has something where they scan a card and it kind of sees wrinkles that maybe you otherwise wouldn't have seen. When you guys were going through the process and you're introducing new technologies, how do you keep that from becoming a tougher grading system? How does it stay consistent from the beginning? Or is it just assumed that over time, because of the assistive technologies, that the grading is going to become a little bit more strict?
Well, strict, I don't know if I'd use the word strict as much as accurate. I mean, if you have new technology, it's going to help you find flaws. Those flaws are already there. But if you can see them, with a certain kind of light or a certain kind of magnification or certain kind of a spectral thing, or the edges where you're looking at a side view, surface that you're seeing smudges or print dots that are, the problem is, and this is the backlash with eye appeal, is that if you can only see the flaw with the newest of the new microscopes, then is it really a flaw that's going to damn it, that should downgrade the card? BGS, in its defense, is breaking it down into 4 subgrades, and so the standard has to be the standard. A different way to figure out, to more dispassionately look at the centering is also tricky, because not all cards have borders, not all cards. So it just, in theory, what you're saying, Greg, is right, is that with new technology, you can see more flaws. That would drive the grades down, but there has to be some consistency with the fact that this is still a card that, although maybe it's not gem mint, maybe it's not pristine, it's still mint. It's still mint. The problem is with PSA, that's the huge difference between a 9 and a 10. And
Yeah.
they are the
Value-wise.
ones that have tightened up. And I don't know that it was based on, it might have been based on technology when they tightened up from their 60-40 lenience to 55-45.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned
Months ago, or whatever that was.
if technology sees things that were always there, but if the technology is seeing what was always there and before it wasn't seen, so before it slipped through the cracks, it is a stricter grading system, which worries me, because yes, it's catching more. So yes, it's probably more accurate, but in response to that, then that means the things that weren't being caught before were graded easier than the things that are being graded now. Mike, I know that you have probably thoughts about grading standards potentially changing and more things being caught. Is this an issue, or is this something that I just need to let go of?
Well, can it be both? It can be an issue, and we can also just accept it because there's nothing that we can do about it. Either we stop grading altogether, especially with PSA, which I have done, or we accept it and continue grading with PSA. We can complain about it all day, but we're not really doing anything other than potentially educating people, but also turning people off from watching our channels because we just keep talking about the same things.
Greg, if this was a bigger deal, TAG would be in first place of grading, because TAG has the latest technology and is machine learning as well as that. And the hobby has not said that's what we want. They want that little bit of subjectivity and that little bit of interpretive nuance, that this is a mint card and this is a gem mint card and this is near mint and this is excellent and all that stuff. The hobby wants expert grading that has some latitude to give people what they think is a mint card and not what a machine says.
I get that. I do get that. But I feel like, isn't it possible that in the automobile industry, it's possible that Toyota might not make the best car. It might be Honda, but if somebody believes and is loyal to the Toyota brand, they keep buying Toyotas even if Honda is better. And I'm not saying somebody's better than PSA or not. I think there's a certain level of consistency and brand loyalty that, and a culture of your collection that is hard to take. And I think it's to take away. And I think it's possible, at least in my opinion, I think it's possible that the best grader is not the most popular grader. No?
Guys, I mean, all PSA 10s are not equal. all PSA 9s, all BGS 9s. I mean, even with all the same subgrades. So this is a good development that it's defeating the notion, just like with when the PMG greens in low grades go for spectacular prices, that the grade is one indicator of the value of the card, and it may not even be the most important indicator. And so I appeal and buying the card, not the grade, to take the grade as this is an 8. You should look at the serial number. You should look at who's the grader. You should look at what is the defect that made it an 8. Is that something that's important to you? All that is good news. If grades are just, if it's so basic that an 8 is an 8 is an 8, a 9 is a 9 is a 9, that's not as dynamic. There's not as much opportunity for the hobby being about passion. And my PSA 10 is better than your PSA 10, or my BGS 9.5 is equal or better than your PSA 10. This is all part of the hot stove league that is the reason there's so many channels. If it was too deterministic, that would be boring.
I absolutely love that point. You're absolutely right. If there were 2 football teams, the NFL would be boring, but we get to, kind of needle our buddies a little bit because of their team. I mean, that it creates an infinite number of factors when looking at a card and whether it meets your eyes. It's a really interesting point. But what I do think that it means is I think that it means that the number is not as valuable as they want to think that it is. You're right. An 8 is not an 8 is not an 8, or an 8 is an 8 is an 8. It's not that's not the case. There's an infinite number of factors, which means an 8 to you might be different than an 8 to me. And it does make it more fun. It makes it more interesting. Mike, you just sat up in your chair, so I'm ready for some good stuff.
No, I am very antsy all the time. I move around a lot. It's just me. But to Dr. Beckett's point, an 8 that isn't centered is not a good card to me. I would not buy an 8 that's off center. And 8s can be fairly off center based on their guidelines, whereas I would rather have a 4 that's beautifully centered than an 8 that isn't, because centering to me is the most important criteria.
That makes you a collector, not an investor, because investors don't think that way. They're going to take the 8 because it's an 8, not the 4 that's better looking.
Will they ever think that way, though, you think? I mean,
Probably
in the future,
not if they're investors, if they stay investors, but I want the investors to move into the passion side of the hobby that's not just about the dollars. And that's
how do we do that?
Hard. Well, not all of them are going to do it. Some of them will, some of them won't.
That's an interesting point. So the people who care the most about the grade is the investor, and the person who cares the least about the grade is the collector. I mean, that's so true. I mean, it's so obvious. It's so true. That I don't know. I'm at a loss. Mike, help me out. He's right. He's right.
Yeah, I was just laughing at some of the comments. Sorry, but I got distracted by comments.
Actually, Greg, can I ask Dr. Beckett a quick question?
Of course.
I love hobby history. I've been meaning to ask you this if I ever get a chance to talk to you again. How did you decide? This is my copy of the first Beckett ever. How did you decide what 2 cards to put on the cover? Do you remember that? The 65 Clemente and the Dale Murphy rookie, autographed rookie, it looks like, too. So
they were sitting on my desk, I think. Well, in those days, it was pretty much me, myself, and I. And I wanted to show an older card, a vintage card, which Clemente was my favorite player. And so I didn't put his rookie because it was it's horizontal rather than vertical. And then Murphy was just homage to the fact that I was going to be covering new cards, not that wasn't a brand new card, but it was newer, that was not considered as old, and I just wanted to show that. So Clemente was very sentimental. Murphy, a lot of people like Murphy. He's not my favorite player. I actually think he has a Hall of Fame case, but and I collected back in the day. This is a disclosure. Back in the day, and I never really priced them because there wasn't there was so not a conflict there. But I collected Hall of Fame or other good player autographed rookie cards and autographed cards. I collected a lot of autographed cards, so that's my card. And I have some Clemente autographs, but they'll keep those at the bank. So they were on my desk. I took them down to a graphic design place and said, make me a cover.
Love it.
That's a fascinating story. I'm glad you asked that. We're at 50 minutes in, giving us about 10. So it prevents my ability to pivot too far off of the topic that we're in. But let's kind of circle back for a second to the original topic, which was the bubble situation. I think we started with Adam and we talked to Dr. Beckett about it for a minute. As a whole, is the card market, Mike, in a bubble, or are segments of the card market in a bubble?
It's segments, and I hear a lot about Pokemon. I don't follow Pokemon, so I might be way wrong, but I feel like Pokemon, based on what I've heard, is fully in a bubble, whereas sports cards segments are in a bubble. Specific sets, specific players are blowing up, specific cards. But yeah, I don't think it's the entire industry as a whole.
Adam, you had originally, we started with a quote from you, and you said that you're not buying any big cards, and I love that you kind of defined that a big card is different for everyone. You're not buying any big cards, at least through the rest of the year. Do you think that it's just big cards that are worth staying away from? Do you think that there are a variety of cards that are in a bubble, or do you think it's just the big stuff that's gotten really carried away? And I mean, what do you think?
Well, honestly, I don't know if they're carried away. They might keep going up. I really don't know. Again, I have a video going on Victor's channel, the Rookie Card Specialist, I think next week, that we already filmed, where I just finished up. I completed one of my lifelong quests. I guess I did it pretty early. I got every Tom Brady base rookie card now. So you can understand why I need a break, right? I've been going pretty heavy with that, and I made a big splash and said I'm just going to finish this up. And so that's really where most of the video I made came from. Is that right now I feel content where I'm at. But hey, if you're just coming in now, hey, you probably want to buy some cards. So I get it, but like Mike says, it's not every card. So there's certainly ways you can find cards that haven't doubled in price recently. And one of the great things now, as we were talking about earlier, someone new coming in, like when I've been collecting cards for a while, but in 2021, I discovered that there was this whole world out there of social media and YouTube. And I found Dr. Beckett's podcast, which I continually listen to still. But I didn't know what prices generally what they were supposed to be. It was 2021, and I'm thinking, is this a fair price, or where was it 6 months ago? And then when a couple months later, Card Ladder really started to turn into something different, where you could look at sales history, stuff like that. So I think people coming in now, even if they're new, there's a tool like that where you could find out if a card is where it's priced, historically speaking. So there's a ton of resources that even weren't available 4 years ago, that people have now.
Yeah, and I'm sure Dr. Beckett, it's mind blowing to think, where are we right now with being able to have real time? I mean, there was a card that I was tracking the other day, and I had an offer on it. I had a best offer on it, and I was sitting there waiting, like going, okay, come on. And then I went to comp it and in Card Ladder, and the card showed up as a comp because it sold to somebody else. And I was like, that one just sold. I was like, that's the one I had a best offer on. I was waiting on. And it's such real time. That's got to be borderline mind blowing that we're at this point where the second a card sale is executed, it's an available comp compared to back in the day where you had teams out all over the country talking to dealers and it shows. That's got to be wild, doesn't it? I mean, could you have ever imagined we'd be at this point?
It's inevitable in the sense that, does anybody think Dak Prescott was or is the best quarterback in the NFL? And the answer is no, except maybe he does. And Jerry maybe thought it for a little while, perhaps. But basically, what happened is when his contract came up for renewal, he had um, the ability to extract the whatever the highest pay of a quarterback was. He wanted that with the guarantees and all that stuff. Okay, so there's the timing of it. And so then the next quarterback, just like with Card Ladder and all these others, going to say, okay, that's what Dak got. Now I want to, so you want to get in line. And so I always wanted to buy what was not for sale. I don't want to buy what is for sale, but strategically, the Goldens of the world, the Heritages, the large auctions have figured out that the sequence, the release of these successive new high scores, it's the video game mentality. It just ties in with the new high score. And so you put something out. But what used to be is that before the last few years here, people will held on to their best stuff. And now they're saying, wow, I can be the new high score. Otherwise, the dual logo man would never have never come out. But it came out at just the right time with just the right level of promotion. And now that's the new high score. And there'll be something else that'll be touted by, the same or different auction. So it's a mindset, and it's infected all of our culture of whatever the standard is. I've got to do better than that, and I'm going to hold the line. And they're not the just say no doesn't work, because it only takes two people to say, I really want this and I can afford it.
Last thing I'm going to ask, and then I'll go around the horn and ask anybody if they have anything they want to shout out or anything. Dr. Beckett, does the same Dr. Beckett who created the 1986 Beckett I have sitting right here next to me, are you surprised that the all-time most expensive card sale is a quote unquote modern card? When you were in the thick of things, and I remember this one right here next to me, by the way, the 84 Fleer Dwight Gooden card is very, very high. So there were cards that were spiking then, but are you surprised? Would you have believed it 30 years ago that the all-time high card was modern, or is that surprising to you?
Guys, the biggest surprise is not that the highest selling card of all time is modern. 30 years ago, it's that it's basketball, that it's not baseball. The hobby 30 years ago was so baseball centric, it would be hard to imagine that any football, basketball, or anything would even come close. So, but it's a beautiful card. And like I said, it was in the right place at the right time. There's some perhaps evidence that there was an attempt to make it the new high score. I mean, that's the drama of the story for Mr. Wonderful. That this is the new high score, and we're players in this industry now.
That's a really good point. It definitely was. I remember when we were buying basketball cards before the first basketball Beckett was out, and before the first tough stuff, was really circulating, that had, okay prices. And it is very shocking that that's the case. That hadn't even crossed my mind. But hey, It's a whole new world in the card industry. All right, Mike, do you have anything coming up that you want to share with anybody out there before we sign off?
I don't think so. I mean, well, I guess okay. I've got my newsletter coming back. I restarted Hobby Hotline. I'm on Hobby Hotline right now. Attic Find Friday yesterday, so I'm excited about that. I also want to shout out the commenters who are amazing here during Hobby Hotline. They always have been. Thank you for showing up and for commenting.
Well
Philly's
said.
Karen there on the screen. Yep.
How about you, Adam?
I just want to say it's an honor being back on Hobby Hotline, especially with you three. And I want to shout out my daughter who just finished her first week of kindergarten, and we're going to get some ice cream to celebrate.
Yes.
All right.
That's a big deal. That actually is a really big deal. Dr. Beckett, do you have anything coming up with Keating or something? Those are my favorites. When you and Keating get going, those are always my favorites for my drive to work.
I got to regulate that a little bit. To self-regulate. We had a good flurry there, and we'll do it again. I promise. But I just got to echo what Mike was saying. This is probably the best chat group, and it may be an indication of the future here with For Collectors. Is that this is the most impressive chat group we've had ever in the history of Hobby Hotline. And I'm only on once a month, but this was impressive, and I hope it's always like this, because this is a lot of fun being with you guys and chuckling with the commenters.
Yeah, I am genuinely honored to be on with the three of you guys. I have so much respect for the three of you. You guys, all three are three of my favorite channels, three of my favorite opinions. So I am absolutely thrilled to be a participant in this. I'm going to be on Sports Cards Live tonight with Jeremy Lee. So if you're out there listening, head over tonight. I saw Joe Perot in the chat earlier.
Yeah.
I appreciate For Collectors for giving me the honor of being able to host this. Absolute blast. Love to hear your guys' insights. The chat, I think the highest number I saw was about 110, 111, something like that. So that is a massive, massive group for 8 a.m., 11 a.m., depending on where you are, or somewhere in between. So thank you to everybody who participated and came out this morning. And remember, next Saturday morning, it will be back. So hope to see everybody there.